The Cleveland Cavaliers have hired Kenny Atkinson to be their new head coach. How does that impact the Detroit Pistons head coaching search? Well, I'm going to tell you in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kook Cahill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kook Cahill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. So later on today's episode, we'll talk about a potential draft day trade with the Detroit Pistons, and then also a former the former Pistons GM, I think we all know who we're talking about, signs with the Washington Wizards. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end of the podcast as well. But where I want to start off with is obviously the fact that Kenny Atkinson has gotten the Cleveland Cavaliers head coaching job. Now, obviously, on the surface, Kenny Atkinson signing with the Cleveland Cavaliers, what the Cleveland Cavaliers do, and why should we care about what the Cavs do? Well, I think that it really directly impacts the Detroit Pistons, and let's go through it. So a few weeks ago when we had James Edwards III on the podcast, and we talked about the potential of moving off of Monty Williams. If you remember in that episode, and if you remember, I believe it was an episode last week when I talked about how Tom Gores needs to step in and make the decision because there's good candidates right now with connections to your front office that if you move on now, you have candidates out there that you would like. After the Cleveland Cavaliers hired Kenny Atkinson as their head coach, I'm going to reference our guy, James Edwards III again. He tweets this out. Impacts Detroit search as Borrego is available. And this is the sentence right here. This sentence right here is what I want you guys to really pay attention to. He says, and with that, to my knowledge, every candidate Detroit would have went for, aside from J.J. Redick, had they moved on from Monty Williams a month ago, is still available to them. So if you go back and watch the episode with James, and you watched the episode last week, maybe, just maybe, the reason why the Detroit Pistons didn't move as quickly with the head coaching decision, or maybe didn't move as urgently with the head coaching decision, aren't moving, it seems like, as urgently with their head coaching search, is because when Tom Gores and the search firm went through, and Arntel and whoever else was a part of it, when they went through all the candidates and had their interviews, I'm sure they talked about, hey, if we move on from Monty Williams, who are some guys you'd like to bring in? Do you have an idea who you'd like to bring in? And it seems like that everyone that was on Trajan Langdon's list, everyone that Trajan Langdon would have interest in, the list that he provided or the list that he had at that time, those candidates are still available June 24th, which is when I'm recording this. And maybe they believed that if they took their time with this decision with Monty, they were not concerned about losing those candidates. And Borrego is one of those candidates. Now, I believe that James Borrego, now that the Cleveland Cavaliers, who I'm speaking to as now that the Cleveland Cavaliers have hired Kenny Atkinson, I think James Borrego shoots to the top of the Pistons list. I think it has been kind of telling for a while. We've kind of hinted at it on the podcast quite a few times that I feel like the Pistons were watching what LA did and what Cleveland did, and they wanted to see how that would go before they acted. Now, obviously, if LA went a different route and didn't go after JJ, or if they didn't end up hiring JJ, let's say they ended up getting Dan Hurley, I do think there's a chance that they'd be going after JJ Redick right now. But JJ's gone. Like James mentioned, he is one of the players that was on the list that has been taken off. Cleveland doesn't look like they were interested in Kenny Atkinson. So let's wait to see what Cleveland does. Do we lose one of our candidates is what they're thinking. And they did not. So where they would be technically like a month ago, whenever they first hired Trajan with the head coaching search, they are basically, it seems like to them, and I can't say I disagree, you're in the same spot as you would have been a month ago or 3 weeks ago or 2.5 weeks ago, whenever you made the hiring official. I think it was the 31st. They're in the exact same spot. So there's nothing for them to be too concerned about and nothing for them to really rush about because the guys that they were interested in are right there. So I want to talk about that. Also, like I said, I think James Borrego jumps to the top of this list. I would say he would be the betting favorite. I don't think he is 100% they're going to be the coach, but he is who I would believe to be the betting favorite. He spent time, I should say, with Trajan Langdon last year in New Orleans as an assistant coach. He, I think, is a really good offensive mind, X's and O's wise. And this last season he had in Charlotte, despite the injuries and despite what they went through, he actually had a good season and they still moved on from him. So whatever, I don't know what the exact reasoning was for that. I'm going to go talk with Locked On Hornets and see what they can give me about that. But he is a really well-respected coach in the NBA. And there were a few tweets. One of them was from Evan Sidery, who one of those guys I have my notifications on because, reports and rumors, etc. One of the things they tweeted out, or he tweeted out, was that Borrego's coaching style offensively would really suit Cade Cunningham and Borrego's ability to get the most out of Cade offensively. So, and again, obviously they have connections going back, him and Trajan going all the way back to New Orleans. So I think Borrego shoots to the top of this list, but I would not rule out at all Sean Sweeney. And I wouldn't rule out Micah Nori. So this is how I'm looking at the Pistons head coaching search as of right now. It depends which way Trajan Langdon actually wants to go. Because after his press conference, after sleeping on it a little bit, I think there is a good chance that I don't think he was BSing everybody, but maybe I don't think he revealed his hand as much as I initially thought. I think he covered a lot of his bases. I think he said a lot of things that a lot of people would like to hear. But the only real thing I think that at this point, now that I've sat on it and slept on it, they really took a stance on is having good development. Now, I don't know if I really necessarily completely agree that having good development, a good developmental system means you want to keep every young guy and you want to develop all of them. I don't know if that necessarily is the case. I also don't necessarily think it's the case that he's just ready to, I don't want to say punt on this season, but not necessarily care as much about winning this year and trying to take it slow. I think that could be the case, but I don't know if it's 100% that way either. So I think a lot of things are wide open. And I think after re-listening to a lot of what he said, I think Trajan left the door open for really any route he wants to go. I think he hinted at how some of the things he feels like, but I don't think he really put himself into a corner of where he has to go. I think he left the door open to a lot of things. I say that to say, if they are trying to put together a good team next year, and I don't mean like sacrifice everything to be a 40-win team. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if they're trying to put good pieces on the team next year to be competitive, to compete for the play-in, maybe make the play-in, maybe make the AC as they're battling through the play-in. Like, if that's what they're trying to do, then I think Borrego would be the best bet. That's who I would go with. If that's what they are trying to do in the kind of offseason, the kind of actions and moves they make, that's who I would go with. I'd go with Borrego. If they are trying to go slow, if they are not going to make much changes, if they're going to keep all of the young guys, if they're trying to just, like I said, take it slow and just develop all these guys and give them a chance to grow, again, if that's the route they want to go and they're going to take on large contracts that aren't good contracts, and like I said this in the last episode, I went through and looked at all the contracts you possibly could take on that are like really bad contracts, but they're still good players and you might still get assets with them. There's not very many opportunities for that out there. Like, I don't see very many at all. Like, maybe Zach LaVine, but I don't know if the Bulls are that desperate. And it sounds like the Kings and the Bulls are already talking about a potential trade. Doesn't mean the Pistons can't. But I don't know if the Bulls are like attaching all these assets to LaVine. I don't know if they hate him that much. And then the only other one I can really look at is Andrew Wiggins. But what's the asset people are talking about from the Warriors? What is this big asset? I don't think they're giving up one of their young guys to get off of Wiggins. Like, that's not happening. So, like, I just don't know how possible those, we're going to take on big contracts, but they're still good players, but overpaid contract and get assets with it. I just don't know how many opportunities there actually are of those out there. So I think if he does go that route, Trajan, that is, you're taking on bad contracts and the players are probably not that good. So if that's the route they go to replenish the assets and you want to go slower, Sean Sweeney is who I'd go with. So that's where I'm at right now with the coaching search. I think it's between, my personal opinion, I think it's probably between Sweeney and Borrego. And for me, it just depends which route are you going this offseason. Are you making some, doesn't have to be ultra aggressive moves, but are you making somewhat aggressive moves this offseason? Okay, if so, then I'm going with Borrego. If you're being slow about it, you're kind of trying to be patient and not do as much and kind of just let it go, let it grow as it goes. Now I'd go with Sean Sweeney and hope he has a great developmental staff and he knows how to develop these guys like that. Those are the two routes I'd go. It really depends. So that's where I'm at as of right now. But I do think Kenny Atkinson getting the Cavs job is a big, big deal for the Detroit Pistons. Because James Borrego, I'm telling you, is on this list and is highly thought of on that list. I'm telling you guys that. So don't know if he's 100% going to get it. Like I said, I think it's between Sweeney and Borrego. But that Kenny Atkinson getting the Cavs job really makes it interesting for the Pistons. And I'm really interested to see which way they go. I know Borrego is one of those guys that they really like. So do they go with Sweeney? Heck, maybe Michael Norrie. Maybe they really like him. But I think it's between Sweeney and Borrego. We'll see which way they go. I think it depends what kind of actions they want to take this offseason. But let me know in the comment section down below where you guys are leaning. Do you guys think this Cavs hiring of Kenny Atkinson is a big deal? Do you guys like Borrego? Do you like Sweeney? Is there another candidate you like altogether that the Pistons should be going after? Let me know. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at Cougar Hill. When we come back, is there a possibility of the Detroit Pistons making a draft day trade? Talk about that coming up. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you'll get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers at ebaymotors.com. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. I really do appreciate all of your guys' support. The YouTube channel continues to grow. We're on our way to 10,000 subscribers. You guys are one of those people who are watching, not subscribed. Please hit that subscribe button. All the 5-star reviews, all the followers we've gained, the community we've built. I really appreciate all of your guys' support, really. And let's continue to show Locked On that we are the fastest growing network, or the fastest, well, we are the fastest growing network. That is true. But also the fastest growing fan base at the network, fastest growing community at the network. Continue to show them that. I really appreciate you guys. Before we get into the draft day trade, I just got done watching JJ Redick's introductory press conference with the Lakers. I'm so upset. I'm so upset they didn't get JJ. I know that he doesn't have any coaching experience, but I really, really feel confidently that JJ is going to be a hell of a coach. Like, I know he doesn't have NBA coaching experience, but he knows the game so damn well. I'm not talking about just one of those people who are on a network and happens to say a smart thing or two. Like, he knows the X's and O's. He knows how to play. He knows, like, the very minute details. He knows how to create an offense, what goes into a defense. He knows what he's looking at. Like, that press conference was tremendous. I was just sitting there watching it, and the little F-bombs he was dropping. I was like, whoa, okay. The energy, I'm loving it. So I'm disappointed, man. I would have loved to have JJ in Detroit. And, you know, he already follows me on Twitter. We've interacted before. Would have helped me out. You know, you feel me? Having JJ in Detroit. Maybe could have got him on the podcast. You feel me? Who knows? I know he said he's not messing with the podcast no more, but all that kind of stuff could have happened. You feel me? But anyways, let's move on past that. I really am rooting for JJ, though. I think he's going to be great. But let's move on to the draft day trade now. So at the press conference with Trajan Langdon, Something we talked about in the last episode, obviously, but I just want to bring it back up for those of you guys who maybe did not listen or didn't tune into the press conference either. Trajan was not asked directly about this. He just said it himself. And it jumped out to me. As soon as he said it, I was like, whoa, you didn't have to say that. Like, you weren't asked about that. That's telling. And the quote he said was, whether we're picking at 5 or somewhere else, we're going to have a pick in this draft. And I feel confident about the guys in this draft. So again, he did not have to say or somewhere else in this draft, whether it be 5 or somewhere else. He kind of already told that, hey, we're looking at moving off of 5. We might move back into this draft, but we like the guys in this draft. So after that, obviously, the takeaway is, okay, the Pistons might trade their pick. But we're going to shout out our guy, friend of the podcast again. I feel like we've been mentioning James a lot. We got to get James back on the podcast. I've had him on the podcast like 3 times in the last 2 months. He's probably sick of it, but those of you guys who are listening, go hit up James in his DMs and mention, tell him to get back on Locked On Pistons. But anyways, James came out with an article today. 24th says, this is why I'm reading it. And in this article, he talked about his sense, what he's hearing, what he understands, what he feels like, is that the Detroit Pistons are going to have a pick in the first round. He doesn't believe the Pistons, and I haven't heard this either, but the Pistons are not going to trade out of the first round completely. Like, they're not going to trade the 5th pick for a player, and that's it. They want to stay in the first round. However, I think as of right now, I'm moving away from James' article, but now I'm saying my own opinion. I think the Pistons are going to trade back. I think it's incredibly likely that the Pistons are going to try to acquire future assets by trading back. One of the things, like I said earlier in the episode, I don't feel like immediately after the presser, when I recorded my quick reaction, I feel like, okay, he gave a very clear vision. He told us basically what's going to happen, what he's going to do. We know what's going to happen this offseason. I don't feel that strongly anymore. I think there's still a bunch of ways they could go. I don't think he revealed his hands as much as I originally thought, but he did reveal, I feel, very quickly that, and repeatedly, that acquiring assets is a major thing for him. And I can't blame him. You guys remember, on this podcast, I spent months, and once it became clear that Weaver was probably not going to be here, I spent months talking about this. The asset management, and even years, to be honest, the asset management of the last front office was absolutely horrific. It was terrible. And it goes all the way back when we went into what went wrong with this past regime. I think we did that in like March or whatever. I forget when exactly we did that episode. But I went all the way back. I said it started in 2020 when the Pistons had created all that cap space. A big misconception among Pistons fans is that Troy Weaver took over a team with salary cap hell, and he had to get off of Blake's contract. And no, the Pistons had cap space. The previous year, they got rid of Andre and Reggie's contract for an immediate expiring contract. It was literally just salary cap relief. That's all it was. So they created cap space for the next front office to take over and have that flexibility. That was the whole point and why Weaver was brought in. He didn't have no salary cap hell. That's a big misconception amongst Pistons fans, simply because Blake was still on the team. And they ended up waiving and stretching Blake. They ended up buying him out. Either way, his contract wasn't like tying them down. They had a lot of cap space still. And instead of using that cap space to acquire bad contracts like a lot of rebuilding bad teams do. Look at what OKC did. Look at Philadelphia. A lot of these teams, what they do at the beginning of a rebuild, they take on bad contracts to acquire future assets. Look at, I know it's not the same thing at all, but just look at all the other rebuilding teams. I don't know, Houston and Brooklyn didn't, or not Brooklyn, but Houston didn't acquire it the same way. Obviously, they had James Harden. But just look at all the rebuilding teams, the assets they have. When you don't have that star to trade to get assets, the way you go about getting assets is by, look, we're going to be bad, so we're going to acquire this bad contract, and we're going to take some assets. So when we're ready to be good, we have these assets to use to go all in. We have these assets. And instead of doing that, Troy Weaver uses cap space on players for the immediate. Jeremy Grant, Mason Plumlee, Josh Jackson, Jahlil Okafor. That's what he did. So they never once made acquiring future assets a priority. Actually, in that first offseason, along with those signings, they also traded away their first-round pick, which is, by the way, still protected and owned by the New York Knicks. And it really handicaps and makes trading their first-round picks in the future wonky. Let's say that. So, really, never once over the last regime was acquiring assets a big deal. or like a priority. It just never happened. It drove me insane. If you guys have been listening to the podcast for a while, you guys know it drove me insane. I was going crazy. I hated it. So I don't blame Trajan at all. I made a joke the other day on Twitter. Like, I'm sure Trajan got hired. He was like, all right, let's look at all the assets we got. Nothing. What the hell have you guys been doing the last 4 years? Like, I'm sure that's how he looked at it. So I don't blame him at all. If he takes over this team, he's like, okay, yeah, one of the areas we have to get assets because this is Detroit. People aren't going to be willingly choosing to sign here. I'm sorry, everybody. I love Detroit, but that's just not going to happen. We got to be realistic. It's a cold weather city. It's not going to happen, okay? The way you get these guys and the way the 2004 team was built was by trades. You have to have assets to go get these guys, to go get players, and the Pistons have none. This was a long-winded way of saying, I'm sorry. I went on a little bit of a rant with the last regime. I'm sorry. It still makes me angry. The whole point is assets was like a big priority from Trajan in the press conference. The easiest way to acquire future ones is by moving back in the draft. Move back with Oklahoma City. Get there first this year and maybe get it first next year. Or move back with, who are some of the other teams we've been hearing about? Portland. Move back with Portland at 14, get 14, and maybe a future pick next year or 2 years down the line. Move back with the Bulls. Maybe the Bulls want to come up. Maybe you get 11, Levine, and another pick for 5. Who knows? Maybe that's something you do. Maybe you go move back with the Kings. The Kings are rumored to be trying to go up. Maybe you move back with the Kings, get their 13th pick, and move and get a pick in the future. The quickest and easiest way, I know Utah's also been kind of rumored, Grizzlies at 9. That's a real interesting one to watch. That is the easiest way to acquire future assets. If you don't want to take on bad contracts or nothing, the easiest way, quickest way is to trade back in this upcoming draft, stay in the first round, and for moving back, you get a future asset. I won't be surprised. Honestly, I'm betting on it. I think that's incredibly likely because of how important Trajan Langdon really made acquiring assets sound. And look, would I be excited about watching this team next year if they took on bad contracts and got assets and knowing that they're probably not going to be much better next year? No, I wouldn't be excited about the product on the floor. But I would not be able to sit here and blame Trajan for wanting to make assets a big priority because the Pistons literally have none compared to any other rebuilding team. They can't make trades. They don't have value in trades. They'll just get outbid by everybody. That is a big deal. So I have no problem with that whatsoever. Actually, I'm happy about it that Trajan looks at that and he's prioritizing that. It should have been prioritized years ago. So long story short, yeah, I think a draft day trade is coming for the Pistons. I think they're going to move back into the first round. Because this draft is so crazy after the top, and even in the top 3, I feel like what I've read a lot about this draft is from 5 to 20, guys could go anywhere. Whoever's at 5, they could go at 15. Whoever goes at 15 could go at 6. It's all, there's not much of a gap, it seems like, between each player, according to the league, across the league. And if you like a guy that's you feel like will be there at 13, why not move back? It's in this kind of draft. So that's where I stand with it. There is a player that they really like, or not. Let me not say they really like. I don't know. I think that they would really like is someone that James mentioned in his article. He plays for Cholet Basket. I believe that's how you say it. His name, I believe, is Trajan Langdon. He is turning 19. He's a prospect. He's a guy that Tankathon has ranked at 13 going to Sacramento. That's a name I'd watch for. Everything I've read about him is he's a high ceiling kind of guy. They want to take a swing at a high ceiling guy late or mid first and get a future asset. I wouldn't be shocked about that. Please, guys, don't clip that. Don't cut that podcast right there. And where I said they really like it. That was a misspeak. I didn't mean to say that. I think they like him. I would be intrigued by him. James mentioned him. So I'm just saying, watch out for him. I don't know whether they actually really like him or not. I haven't asked about it. I haven't talked about it with anyone I know. Don't read too much into that. That one, I know I tell you guys to read some of the stuff I say. That's one of those ones where I'm saying that is more so me just trying to connect some dots. That is not me hinting at anything. Do not let's don't get me in trouble. Don't get me in trouble here. But when we come back, speaking of Troy Weaver, he signed with Washington, the Washington Wizards. What's going on? I love sports, and I've played them my whole life. And I've loved sports literally since I was a kid. Sports has been everything for me. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like how I usually want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. That's with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Again, try out FanDuel today. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review or whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So, Troy Weaver, former Detroit Pistons GM. We know a lot about Troy Weaver, don't we? And he has signed with the Washington Wizards, which I believe is his hometown, right? I believe I read earlier that it was his hometown. Let me click the article. It's from the Detroit News. I'm almost 100% sure that it is his hometown. Yeah, they say here he's going home. So he signed with his hometown in Washington. And according to Woj's tweet, he is being signed as a senior advisor. So I don't know what exactly that is. I know the Detroit News says here they're not exactly sure what role he's going to play. I know Woj's tweet said a senior advisor, but I'm sure that could mean a lot of things. He could be doing a lot of things with them. He probably would be doing some scouting. That's what I would say. It's probably what he's doing. I'll say this. I don't want anyone to be unemployed, obviously. So the fact that Troy got a job, good for him. Two things I have to say about this. Two things, and then we'll wrap up the podcast. First thing I have to say is I'm a little bit confused. And again, I'm happy he's employed. I'm happy he's got a job. I hope it goes well. I don't know how, watching these last 4 years in Detroit and how this went, how he got a job so quickly. I don't know what Washington was like. Maybe he wowed them in the interview, or maybe they really like him. I don't know. We'll see what happens. So that's the first takeaway I had. The second takeaway I had, or second thought I had was, and this one's probably where a lot of Pistons fans are thinking. There is a lot of debate within the Pistons community about how much of this really was Troy Weaver's fault. There is a lot of discussion about which decisions was Weaver, which decisions were Arntellum, which ones were Tom, which ones was another faction of the front office. Remember, we had a report a few days ago from Vincent Goodwill that there's 4 factions in this front office, in this organization, or at least there was this past year and the last few years. So there's a lot of debate amongst the community about how much this actually was Weaver's fault and how much was he handicapped. I think there's going to be a lot of Pistons fans that, let's say Washington drafts amazing this year, or let's say Washington leapfrogs the Pistons next year. They're already ahead of them. But let's say they move even further into the rebuild next year. 2 years from now, they're farther along in their rebuild, and they're doing great. It's going to be a very interesting discussion that will be being had in the Pistons community. I know it. I know it's going to be, if Troy Weaver goes over to Washington and Washington starts doing some good stuff and they start drafting some good players, and all of a sudden, in a year, you start hearing Weaver, or 2 years from now, you start seeing Weaver's name circulate again in potential jobs because Washington's doing well. Oh my God, it's going to be a very heated time in the Pistons community. Because there are, like I said, there's already some people that believe it wasn't all Troy's fault and that he was kind of handicapped with one arm behind his back because he couldn't make all the decisions. If he goes to Washington and all of a sudden he's playing a big role in what's going on, and now Washington does great, oh my God, it's going to be it's going to be hell in the Pistons community. It's going to be crazy. So I know that probably would lead some people to say, well, you probably should be rooting for him to fail. No, I'm not going to root for anyone to fail. I hope they do well. I hope he does well in Washington. Obviously, not as good as the Pistons. You'd like to see the Pistons do some good things, but hope all things go well for Troy over in Washington. Really hope, he's able to keep the job and, do good things. Don't want to see anyone unemployed. But, yeah, definitely in a few years, if Washington's looking really legit and Troy is like a prominent role in that, it's not going to look good. Pistons fans are going to lose it. And I can't, you know what? At that point, I might not be able to blame them. That would be that would be a turn of events. I'll tell you that much. But let me know how you guys think about it. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at @KookHill. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. Hit that subscribe button at the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace out.